Pompeii didn't burn. It froze. Here's why. We often imagine Pompeii as a sudden, flashing tragedy where citizens were frozen mid-stride by an unexpected wave of liquid lava. But the truth of that autumn afternoon is far more chilling, revealing a slow-motion psychological trap where every logical decision made by the victims actively sealed their doom. By examining the final hours of those who stayed, we uncover a terrifying paradox of human nature. The very instincts that keep us safe in normal times are the exact tools a sleeping giant uses to destroy us. The true catalyst of the catastrophe was not a sudden, unpredictable burst of molten rock, but a silent, invisible shift in the upper atmospheric winds that had protected the Campanian coastline for centuries. For generations, the prevailing coastal breezes blew safely out toward the open Mediterranean, but on this particular autumn afternoon, the wind currents reversed, blowing directly southeast toward the wealthy seaside resorts of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Pliny the Elder, navigating his heavy imperial war galleys toward the mounting smoke, recognized this shift but completely miscalculated its terrifying physical power. He believed his massive wooden ships, powered by hundreds of strong oarsmen, could easily cut through the rising tides, land on the beaches, and rescue his friend Rectina before the mountain fully awakened. But as they drew near, the sea suddenly pulled back in a bizarre low tide, leaving his vessel scraping against a rapidly shallowing seafloor littered with hot, floating stones. The shore was blocked, yet Pliny refused to retreat, ordering his steersman to push forward to the nearby port of Stabii, where his friend Pomponianus was already packing his belongings in terror. Here, the admiral made a fatal psychological error. To calm his panicked companions, he bathed, dined, and went to sleep, his loud snoring echoing through the villa while the courtyard outside slowly filled with falling white pumice. Back in Pompeii, the citizens watched the sky turn to midnight at noon, yet the vast majority of them did not attempt to flee the city walls. Instead of running, they retreated deep inside their grand, stone-walled villas, locking their heavy oak doors, lighting oil lamps, and pouring wine to wait out what they assumed was a temporary atmospheric anomaly. The most shocking revelation unearthed by modern forensic archaeology is that these citizens were not trapped by a sudden wall of fire, but by their own meticulous, orderly efforts to protect their property. This tragic decision to stay was driven by a profound lack of geological language, as the Romans did not even possess a word for volcano in their vocabulary, viewing Vesuvius as nothing more than a peaceful, vineyard-draped mountain. Furthermore, a massive earthquake had shattered Pompeii in 62 AD, and the survivors of that disaster had learned that the safest place to survive structural tremors was beneath the heavy, reinforced stone arches of their own homes. They assumed the falling stones were merely another localized earthquake, completely unaware that Vesuvius was executing a massive Plinian eruption, colonizing millions of tons of superheated gas and pulverized rock 30 miles into the stratosphere. As Pliny the Elder was awakened by his terrified servants in Stabii, realizing the courtyard was nearly buried and they had to tie pillows to their heads to protect themselves from falling rocks, the first of these deadly surges swept down the northern slope of the mountain, instantly erasing the neighboring town of Herculaneum before anyone there could even scream. While Pompeii was slowly buried under a relentless rain of light pumice, the neighboring resort town of Herculaneum, situated right at the foot of the volcano, met a completely different and far more instantaneous fate. Hundreds of wealthy citizens had fled to the stone-vaulted boat chambers lining the beach, believing the massive, thick brick arches would act as indestructible bomb shelters against the falling debris. From the sky. For nearly 2,000 years, historians believed these beachfront citizens had successfully escaped by boat, as the town itself appeared empty of remains. But when modern archaeologists finally excavated the ancient shoreline in the early 1980s, they made a gruesome discovery: hundreds of skeletons huddled together in the dark, damp recesses of the stone vaults, preserved in the exact positions of their final moments. The positions of these skeletons revealed absolutely no signs of defensive struggle, slow suffocation, or panic. They were frozen in remarkably relaxed, resting poses, some cradling sleeping infants, others clutching their family gold, and some lying down as if waiting for a storm to pass. When forensic anthropologists analyzed the bones of these beach dwellers under high-powered microscopes, they discovered a terrifying chemical and physical signature that shattered the traditional narrative of volcanic death. The first pyroclastic surge to strike Herculaneum was not a cloud of ash, but a superheated thermal wave reaching temperatures of over 500 degrees Celsius, moving faster than a racing car. As this invisible wall of heat breached the open stone arches, the temperature was so extreme that it did not merely burn the flesh, it instantly vaporized the soft tissues, muscles, and internal organs of the victims in a fraction of a second. The thermal shock was so violent that their brains boiled instantly inside their heads, causing their skulls to explode from the sudden buildup of internal steam pressure, leaving behind distinct, shattered bone patterns that modern forensic scientists had never seen outside of high-voltage industrial accidents. Meanwhile, in Pompeii, several miles further downwind, the victims faced a slower, more agonizing psychological torture as the ash column collapsed in successive, suffocating waves. Those who had chosen to stay indoors quickly realized their fatal mistake as the falling pumice piled up against their doors and windows, physically trapping them inside their own homes while the wooden roofs groaned under the immense weight of the volcanic gravel. When the heavy tiled roofs finally caved in, crushing those beneath them, the desperate survivors who managed to crawl out were forced into a pitch-black landscape filled with toxic sulfur gas and fine, glass-like ash that turned to liquid cement in their lungs with every breath. Across the bay in Misenum, the teenage Pliny the Younger watched the southern horizon dissolve into a towering, jagged wall of black cloud lit by forks of volcanic lightning, completely unaware that at that very moment, his uncle had collapsed on the beach of Stabii, his lungs seized by the toxic air, his body abandoned by his fleeing crew as the darkness swallowed the coast. The ultimate paradox of Pompeii lies in the chilling realization that its total, violent annihilation is the sole reason we possess such a vivid, unfiltered window into the daily lives of the ancient Roman world. Had Vesuvius remained dormant, the grand villas, the vibrant political graffiti on the street corners, the carbonized loaves of bread still sitting in the bakeries, and the intimate wax tablet love letters would have decayed into dust, erased by the slow, relentless march of medieval development and natural erosion. For over 17 centuries, the entire city lay encased in a dry, oxygen-free tomb of volcanic ash, perfectly insulated from moisture, bacteria, and human hands, effectively freezing a bustling, corrupt, and beautiful Roman Tuesday in perpetuity. Yet, the most profound and haunting revelation of Pompeii is not the preserved gold jewelry, the erotic frescoes, or the majestic temples of the gods, but rather the empty spaces left behind by the physical bodies of the dead. When the visionary 19th-century archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli began systematically excavating the ruins, he noticed that the soft tissues of the buried victims had long since decayed, leaving behind perfect, hollow cavities within the compacted, concrete-like volcanic ash. Instead of destroying these cavities, Fiorelli devised a brilliant, unprecedented technique. He carefully poured liquid plaster into the dark voids, allowed it to harden, and then chipped away the surrounding ash. What emerged were not stone statues sculpted by an artist, but the literal, physical shape of the victims' final gasps of agony, capturing the folds of their woolen tunics, the terror in their clenched hands, and the desperate embrace of mothers holding their children. These plaster casts do not represent the past, they are the physical imprint of a single, agonizing second of transition from life to death, a silent warning cast in plaster that forces us to confront how easily the solid ground beneath our feet can dissolve into air. This brings us back to the fateful decision of Pliny the Elder, who sailed into the ash because he believed his human authority and naval might could conquer the forces of the earth. His nephew's letters survived to tell the tale, but the thousands who trusted their stone walls over their instincts remain frozen in their final silence. If a disaster of this scale were to threaten our modern metropolises today, would we have the wisdom to abandon our stone shelters, or would we, like the citizens of Pompeii, trust our familiar walls until it was too late?